So today we're going to be looking at a scenario where the US attempts to invade the Middle East. Now of course I'm not going to be able to make everyone happy, so if you find this video unrealistic or you don't agree with the outcome, then just remember that I tried my best. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new, and let's go ahead and get into it. So what if the US attempted to invade the Middle East? Now this is what I would consider the Middle East. Some people might be throwing in Afghanistan and Pakistan, but I think that's more like Central Asia and South Asia than it is Middle East. Anyway, this is what the US is going to be attempting to invade, so let's go ahead and get started. So starting off, we're going to be taking a look at naval dominance in the region. So this is what we have for the Middle East. Now, of course, they're going to be occupying all of the waters around each coast. And in order for the US to invade this, they obviously need to get naval control first. Now, logistically, the best place for the US to make a landing would be in Oman or Yemen. Alternatively, they could also make a landing in Turkey, but then they would have to fight off all of Turkey, which would be difficult itself. So invading a weaker country like Yemen would make it easier for them to get a foothold. So at first, the US Navy makes a blockade in the Indian Ocean and makes a landing on the island of Socotra. From here, the US Navy starts to push back the Middle Eastern Navy and manages to fight back to this point. From here, the US Navy makes a push onto the coast of Yemen and a military landing is planned. So now the US military makes a landing in Yemen and establishes a foothold on the Arabian Peninsula. From here, the US takes advantage of a broken Yemen and starts invading areas around the coast. Now keep in mind that this is full-on, full-scale warfare. It's not like in Afghanistan where the US military wasn't fully involved. This is the entire US military that's fully involved. So saying the US couldn't take on Afghanistan doesn't work here, because when the US was in Afghanistan, their entire military wasn't mobilized. It was just like a small portion of the military. So this is the full US military. Anyway, after pushing around the coast and taking major cities of Yemen, the country starts to fall. Eventually, Yemen surrenders, and Saudi Arabia and Oman start to push into Yemen. Back to the Navy map, the US continues to push back the Middle Eastern Navy. They also gain naval dominance over the coast of Oman. Back in the Middle East, the US is starting to push up Western Arabia, but is slowed down as it approaches the mountains. Over in northeastern Yemen, the US Army manages to completely push out Saudi Arabia and Oman, and starts an advance into both countries. Now, this area of the Middle East is mostly desert, so traversing through it is going to be very difficult for the US. After stopping their advance into the desert, the US starts to focus more on the coast of Oman. After taking major cities on the coast, the US Army starts to push up towards the capital and manages to capture it. Over in the west, the Saudi Arabian Army manages to push back the US out of the desert areas of the country and starts to push back into Yemen. Meanwhile, the US Army continues to push into Eastern Arabia, taking out the UAE and finishing off Oman. So now the US has captured the major coastal areas of Arabia and has a pretty good foothold in the Middle East. From here, I'd imagine that the US Army would push up into Saudi Arabia, and after capitulating Saudi Arabia, they'd want to push up, take over Israel/Palestine, and maybe capture all of Syria, Jordan, and Iraq. When it comes to the Middle East, the major powers are Turkey, Egypt, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, which are all pretty powerful countries and would be hard to take out even on their own. Also, if it isn't obvious already, there's going to be no nuclear bombs in this scenario. Israel is not allowed to use their nukes, and the US is not allowed to use their nukes. Anyway, the US Army continues to push into Eastern Arabia, taking full control of the UAE and Oman. Meanwhile, in the west, Saudi Arabia continues to push out the US from Yemen. From here, they push over and start to threaten US-occupied Oman. Back to the Navy map, the US Navy continues to push out the Middle Eastern Navy and now takes control of the southern Red Sea. Over in the Persian Gulf, the US Navy has easy victories along the coast of Arabia as the countries have already capitulated, but does meet some backfire when it comes to the Iranian Navy. So taking a quick look back real quick, this is what the US Navy has occupied, and on land, this is what the US Army has occupied. Back on land, the US Army rearranges and starts to push back the Saudi Arabian Army. They manage to completely recapture Oman and Yemen, and start a full-scale invasion of Saudi Arabia. After capturing the capital of Saudi Arabia, the country surrenders, and the rest of the Middle Eastern armies start to push into northern Saudi Arabia. So now the US has capitulated one of the Middle Eastern powers. They've also gained control of many oil fields, which means they can trade that oil with other countries, and they can also use that oil for themselves. So resource-wise, the US is doing really good. With the capitulation of Saudi Arabia, the US Navy easily sweeps up into the Red Sea, but does have some trouble facing against the Navy of Egypt. Back in the Persian Gulf, the Iranian Navy has some success pushing back the US Navy, but ultimately, the US Navy keeps control of the waters around their occupied land. From here, the US Army has more trouble against the Middle Eastern countries, as their armies are now fully prepared for a war against the US. Now, fighting a war halfway across the world is going to be challenging for the US, but because of the size of the US Army, it isn't too difficult to manage. The US Army manages to push up and capture Kuwait, and starts getting closer and closer to Egypt. Now, the US is pretty familiar with this region, especially this one, so they started to push up into Iraq. In the Persian Gulf, the US Navy continues to push up and take waters around the Arabian Peninsula, and even manages to capture land around Iran. And in the Red Sea, they also push up the coast. From here, the US starts starts to push up north and takes over both Israel and Palestine. They then take over Lebanon and start pushing into Syria. Over in Egypt, they push into the Suez area, but is cut off at the Suez Canal. And the US starts to push into both northern Syria and northern Iraq. Now, holding on to this land right here is going to be difficult just because of the current political status of both of these countries. But looking at this map, there's only 3 countries left, which are Turkey, Iran, and Egypt. Now, invading both Turkey and Iran would be extremely difficult for the US just because of the mountains and the armies of these countries. But invading Egypt may be easy for the US because all the cities in Egypt are very centrally located. Basically, every city in Egypt is located in the purple, and everywhere else is literally nothing. So the US starts an attempted push into Egypt and manages to capture the northern cities. But while this is happening, both Turkey and Iran make a counter invasion and start pushing back into Iraq and Syria. The US sees this and quickly withdraws its invasion of Egypt, and a new front line is established. Eventually, all the countries involved in this war come to a peace agreement. Basically, the US will leave all these countries alone under these conditions. Condition 1 is that the USA will annex all of Yemen. Condition 2 is that the USA will annex all of Oman. Condition 3 is that the USA will occupy all of the UAE, and condition 4 is that the USA will occupy all of Saudi Arabia. All of the other countries have to do nothing. So we are left with a world map that looks like this. In the Middle East, the USA now has more influence than ever, and even annexes the 2 countries of Yemen and Oman. The USA also occupies the countries of the UAE and Saudi Arabia. Eventually, the Yemen and Oman annexations are combined into Yemen, and the US starts to take advantage of the oil fields in Saudi Arabia. Now, when it comes to the USA's occupation of these regions, obviously there's going to be a lot of backlash and a lot of rebellions. When it comes to the Saudi monarchy, the US allows the monarchy to continue its rule, but it is still considered under the US as the US occupies the entire country. The monarchy in Oman is dissolved, but the monarch is allowed to run for elections in the annexed Oman. So they're kind of booted from the role as a monarch, but they technically are allowed to be I guess president / governor or whatever you want to be called. So obviously not everyone is going to agree with this scenario. Of course, that's what happens with every video. Not everyone's going to agree with it. Like I said, I can't satisfy both sides, so if this video offended you, then I'm sorry. But I guess I tried to make it not offensive, if that makes sense. I don't intentionally try to make people mad about these videos because I have 2 sides to satisfy. I guess in this scenario, it would be the US side and then the Middle Eastern side. I can't satisfy both sides. But when it comes to military statistics, the US Army would probably not completely fail in the Middle East. The USA did not win in this video. It was a tie, and the US only occupied a little bit of the Middle East. Like I said, these other Middle Eastern countries are just fine. There's nothing bad that happened to them. The USA only occupied these areas. So thank you guys for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. I really appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you in the next video.